Hi, and welcome to Ask Vanessa Anything. We are joining you hopefully on Facebook groups in our Raising Our Resilience parent group, live on YouTube, as well as right here on Zoom for folks who can join us. So why do we do these Ask Vanessa Anything segments? Well, because we end up having a backlog of questions and topics from folks who, would really like to have some eyes on what they're facing these days and what they're trying to figure out in their parenting world, like what's up for them. And, it's been such an interesting kind of journey to be with community in these times, figuring out how to be a parent and what to do. It's not an easy task. And so sometimes we're just diving into some of the hardest things about parenting. And the good news is that we don't have to do that alone. And I take a stand for parents having community in their parenting and not having to be isolated, trying to struggle through difficulties and hide them from each other. And you know how it goes when at drop off and someone's like, how's it going? And you're like, it's okay, but you don't really tell the real story of what's going on. And that's understandable, of course, but at the same time, it's important for us to be real with each other so we can normalize the fact that parenting isn't easy and there are difficult moments. As much as it's rewarding, as much as we love and adore our kids and think they are so freaking cute, we also can struggle in our parenting and have doubts and have questions and not be sure. And that makes sense because how else are we supposed to, like get down with the growth that needs to happen? I mean, think of all the different jobs that you've ever had. And, can you think of ones that were just as important as parenting? And even if you can't think of one that you've had that was just as important as parenting, think about any occupation that comes to mind that has the same kind of stakes, where a whole nother human being's sort of like life and sort of outcome is in your hands. Now, of those professions or those roles, can you think of one that we don't societally prepare for with education? Classes, maybe even, the opportunity to like, try our ideas with others and see what other people are thinking, feeling about it, having a mentor or curriculum, time and space with other people to sort through our questions and try and figure things out. So that's why we at Raising Our Resilience, and for myself personally as an educator of parents, really put a stake in the ground for parents having community in this journey. And so welcome if you're here for the first time. If this is your 10th time, I'm joined by one of my clients, Lillian, here on Zoom, as well as Gianni, who has been following us for many, many months and years, having watched most of our YouTube videos on a YouTube channel, if not all of them, and recently doing a consultation with me. So good to have you both here. If you have a question, Lillian or Gianni, pop it in the chat and we'll have a chance to address it. Okay, so first question I have here queued up is from Nicole K. Now, Nicole K is somebody who just joined our Facebook group. Here we go. And what I'm noticing is that, when folks join, sometimes they're just kind of getting to the heart of the matter because they only have one little spot to ask a question in their registration. And so check out her question. So Nicole K with her 3-year-old asks, our daughter is now 3 years old and is very hard to convince her to do certain things like getting dressed, cleaning up, or saying please and thank you. So can you share some suggestions? Absolutely, Nicole. Excited to support you today. So one of the things that we need to know about 3-year-olds is that they are transitioning from like the late toddler to the early preschool time of life. And so the 0 to 3 time, a lot of it has to do with figuring out like just the basic things of how to meet their basic needs, how their body works, what their senses can do for them in terms of being able to, make sense of their environment and so forth. They also get a sense of who can they be securely attached to and trust and go to with their needs. And so they'll turn towards us or they'll turn away from us. And we're really just establishing this baseline of like love, belonging, and getting their basic needs met and keeping them safe and making sure they feel loved and connected. When we shift from 3 to 6, you can tell when a toddler is starting to show this trend too, even in late 2s, is that they start to say, I do.
And it's really a time about like moving forward with their own skills. And one of the ways that they can do that is by getting to try things themselves and having more kind of control over their environment, manipulating it, and making things happen. So oftentimes when we're trying to convince, and I noticed this word convince, a child to do something who's around 3 years old and it's really hard, part of it is from this core piece of I do for myself. And where are we giving them an opportunity to try things and fail, to kind of puzzle through things, to have some autonomy and some control and some choice over what is happening to them, their bodies, their stuff, their environment. And so getting dressed, cleaning up, things like that, like the social scripts of please, thank you, excuse me, etc. A lot of times when we're introducing those things, the child already has something going on that they're focusing on. And so, they'd rather do it independent of your advice. So one thing you can try to kind of find out which one it is the first thing you can do is advice I give to a lot of folks around getting into a child's world is get down at her level, connect with what she's already focusing her attention on, and see if there's something there that still needs to be like sort of carried through. Because we would love our kids, for example, to be focusing on getting dressed and learning how to do that independently. But maybe they're more interested in figuring out how to sort their toys from biggest to smallest. And we're just not even tuned in with that because our agenda is get dressed. But their sort of developmental agenda at the moment is to figure out and get to the bottom of this query that they have. Or what happens when I pour things out? Or how loud of a sound can I make with this toy? Or et cetera, right? So they oftentimes kids are not just doing stuff. They're actually on a mission. And I used to do this with my proteges or like, folks that I would be consulting with in preschool environments when they got their 2.5 to 3-year-olds and 3 to 3.5 in their environment. I'd say spend the first like 3 days, especially just observing their spontaneous activity. Like, what are they up to right now? What is their kind of the deeper work that they're like the questions that they're trying to answer right now? How do I get someone to play with me? Where does this go? How does this thing work? What happens if I lots of questions around the physics of things, right? What happens if I smash it? What happens if I stretch it? What happens if I hit it? What happens if I bonk it? What happens if I throw it, right? All these questions that are coming from their spontaneous activity are very important because that's what they're like already intrinsically motivated or naturally inspired to be focusing on. So getting a sense of what that is over 3 days for a brand new relationship, or maybe over 30 minutes or even 3 minutes in a mini version with your child can go really far. And then you can name what's happening and even get curious too. Yeah, oh, seems like you're trying to figure out how loud of a sound you can make with that drum. Have you figured anything out yet? Oh, okay. So if you hit it like harder and in the middle, big sound. Okay, cool, neat. Can I try? Great, let me try. Boom. Ooh, that's a neat discovery. And then you can transition. I wish we had more time to do drums. We'll have to do this later. And then you can maybe physically move something, do some kind of action of towards, we got to get to the bedroom and get dressed. And then you can maybe bring in some movement. Do you want to boom, boom your feet on the ground, like the ground is a drum, right? Incorporating the thing they're trying to figure out, their work at this time, their kind of developmental work. I really want you to embrace that idea, incorporating that into the transition to the next thing. And maybe even logging away in your mind, my kid is really curious about how to make sounds right now and how to make them louder and softer. And if I incorporate some of that in the near future, that would probably be very satisfying to them. As a teacher, I would be doing that constantly. I mean, I have 12, 24, 36, sometimes 48 children in my charge across all my years of experience. And I always had like a couple of mental notes for every kid of like, what is really lighting up their little brain around like discovery and learning and growth and skill building. So when you have those mental notes, it also gives you something to do besides get upset when you're making these mental notes, and can put you into more of an observing their growth position than a judging their non-compliance kind of state of mind. Another thing, that's my first tip. The second one is that when you want them to do things like get dressed, clean up, say please and thank you, One of the most powerful things you can do is model for them in their environment the expectations you have. Now, this sometimes seems too obvious. Like, obviously, you don't want to create a double standard, but I cannot tell you the number of times that I've seen an adult ask a kid to do something that they're not doing, or ask a kid to calm down when they're not calm. Or, like, for example, I had this teacher that I was mentoring. Her standard was that the kids could not call her name across the room. She said she would tell them that's rude and you need to come up to someone and get their attention first and then say their name. But then guess what she would do? She would turn right back around and call their name across the room. Guess who else has been guilty of that? Myself. I've absolutely had that where I was unwittingly setting a double standard. So something you can do is do with your child, right? So if it's time to get dressed, consider having them bring their clothes, well, and you get dressed at the same time. You get dressed together. You model for them being focused on getting dressed and making time for that. You can even model, ooh, I really wish I could do more bubbles, but I need to get dressed. Oh boy, let's get dressed, right? Like, even the struggle of the transition, you can model moving through it in a way that, you can even say, I think it would be more fun if I stomped like an elephant to my closet. Do you want to try that with me? Right? Or let's go be elephants. Another thing you can do around cleaning up is, clean up together, do it together. And also express, oh, I don't want to stop playing. Playing is more fun than cleaning up. Shoot. Well, I wonder if there's a way we can make cleanup more fun. I know. Let's put on some music, right? You just model moving through that whole dilemma so that instead of resistance, you show like a way through. Okay. So that modeling coupled with the observing and trying to like meet them at their level with their current developmental work or goal can go really far. And, when it comes to social scripts, what I can say is that it is important to pattern them in. So giving them opportunities to try again, I think, is probably the way that you can bring in the most like grace into the situation. You can say, oh, can you try that again? And you can whisper and just add some dignity to it. Right? Oh, remember to say, excuse me. Because you kind of want to be like on the same team with them, like as if, honey, I know you know better. Like, and I know what you need to say here. And you must have, like, just the benefit of the doubt, you probably just forgot. Remember, we say please, right? And when I do that with students consistently over time, we build this rapport where they don't take my feedback as a correction. They take it as like a helpful hint, as somebody who's looking out for them and who's helping them to be successful. And that can just make such a difference. I mean, really think about how you feel when folks talk to you that way, right? You think about like when you're, in a situation where like, that you could be stumbling into something that maybe, you're not the best at, or it's new. I mean, we have to think what it's like to have limited life experience. And you don't always remember that you can't just walk up to someone and expect them to give you something or give you a turn, right? And that's where the social graces come in. Like, excuse me, I'm interested. Can I please have a turn? That is like, it's like a foreign language for them. They don't really even see the need, and they're not going to truly empathize with the impact of not doing that through and through, like really get it, not only intuitively, but like cognitively, intellectually, most kids until they're 7 or 7.5. So when they're young, we're often just like helping them know what the script is, not necessarily fully helping them like comprehend it all the way through the layers of like why it's important that these social graces exist. So then the other thing you can do is praise when they do it for real, like spontaneously, authentically, where you can feel like the integration of this idea where they're saying please because they've paused and they've noticed, or they say excuse me because they've paused and they've seen someone's busy, and they're looking and they're realizing that this person is a person who has something that's going on and they're not necessarily interruptible right now, and you need to do something to get that excuse me moment to get their attention. Catch them doing that, but don't expect it. Okay, so you can reinforce it and accelerate their growth and even get to some of this before 7 and 7.5, where they're at least fulfilling their social scripts. They're using them and they're maybe feeling them sometimes, but don't expect it until they're at least the minimum like 6.5. I always say, like, that's why kindergartners and first graders can be so different. Kindergartners, like, I don't know if any of you have seen these, like the movies lately. I think there was one that was about a turtle and he was it Leo or something. Anyways, Adam Sandler movie, and it's an animation, and the kindergartners are portrayed by these like little eyeball bouncing balls that are just and they're like all instinct. And then the first graders are like wildly much more organized. And that is a thing, like developmentally. So our kids under 6, we have to give them some space to sort of be their age and be extra reinforcing when they show up in this like more mature way, but actually don't expect it. Okay. So that's a tip for you. Again, if you have a question and you're here live, feel free to put it in the chat because I'm here for the live questions as well. I'll make time for them, but I do need a heads up. Put it in there and so I'll see it. And even if you're listening to the recording, if you queue up, then we can put you into the next one. Okay. All right. Next question. How can I get on the same page with my family members? Asks Min. She says she has an 11-year-old son and she's going to be adopting another child soon. So when we want to get on the same page, that's like a really broad goal. And so what I would want to do, Min, is hear more and talk through more about what specific things you want to get on the same page about. But since you're not here live, let me share some of the things that I've seen parents and families really thrive when they have them in place and they're more on the same page. So number one, routines. What do the daily routines look like? And if you haven't mapped that out collaboratively with your kid yet, top tip, something that I help every single client who ever works with me privately, but especially in our program, it's the first module of the Family Foundations Immersion. We do it at the top of both semesters for a reason. Getting on the same page about routines is going to cover like the majority of the hours you spend with your kids. So it's huge. Within that, also getting on the same page about your limits and expectations, what's okay, what's not okay, and what's sometimes okay. And I would even say, what do we aspire to as like the end goal, but how do we get there, right? Like, where are we now? What do we aspire to? And what are our steps to get there? So for example, I have sometimes clients say, well, I tell my girls when they're fighting that they should stop being mean to each other and they should be nice. And I said, well, that's a big goal, being nice to each other. It's up here. And right now they're being mean. Well, we might need to figure out some steps in between, like, you can be angry, but you need to walk away before you do harm. That's the next step. But you're allowed to stomp and yell in the other room. Totally fine. Next step could be we're going to start trying to calm down in the moment and express our feelings with an I statement. Okay. And maybe there's some support there where I'm there and I'm helping you find your words. Great. Next could be let's identify all the things we like to do together and make plans so that we set ourselves up for success, doing activities that we enjoy, and we pre-negotiate the terms. Okay. Now we're really getting to let's be nice to each other. And then at the top of it is like, let's really admire the qualities in each other that we enjoy. And that even though we're different, we can appreciate our differences. Yeah. So there's some steps in between, right? And so when we're looking at limits, expectations, routines, and things like that, how we treat each other as a family to get on the same page, we kind of have to embrace where we are and build towards our goal from there. So that will help with both routines and limits and getting those kind of boundaries and structures in place. And then, of course, what can follow from there are more refined processes, like how do we solve conflicts as a family? How do we handle our different emotions? What does anger, fear, and sadness look like in our family? What support do we have around those emotions so that we all know it's okay to have them, but we also have ways through them that are productive and even we can grow and learn from? And also, how do we deal with low motivation moments? And these are both of those topics, emotions and motivation, are huge pillars in my program. We do immersive retreats on them for a reason, because this is the area where we often have had the least guidance in our own formative years. And there's now so much research and so many great tools and strategies and frameworks that I've developed and other people have developed that really help us to wrap ourselves around like how motivation can look and how, like, dysregulation and big emotions can look in our families. So as we move through these areas, you'll find that suddenly you have problem solving strategies you can use with your 11-year-old that your other adopted child can pick up on. You'll have maybe even structures like family meetings where you can refer back to your toolboxes. You might even have a space in your house that's like a calm down corner and some routine charts that you've created together. You might even have a list of what behaviors everybody's sort of working on that's, we're like trying to move away from and move towards better behavior in your limits space. All of these pieces come together to create a really beautiful structure where you can align your efforts and be on that same team with that same kind of like thought partner, same page feeling. And I've seen families do this over the course of 3, 6, 9, 12 months, and sometimes it polishing in the second, even third year of this effort. But then like I've been touching bases with some clients who finished work with me, and like we just set something on the calendar just to touch bases and see how they're doing. And I've been hearing back, Vanessa, we're doing really well right now. It seems like all the work I put in, and this was recently with two families that have kids around the same age as Minh, of 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, that all the effort we put in is really paying off. And now we're going to put it to the test in middle school in the fall. And why don't we talk after that? Because they're really curious to see how this all plays out in middle school years. But they're feeling really good that they got this foundation down because of the work that they put in. So it's absolutely possible to set the tone, especially when you have a new child coming in. It can be so helpful, right? To have some of these things in place so they're like they can acclimate to it, but then also to involve them in, maybe rejigging some things, because 2 kids is different than 1. Sharing a bedroom is different than having your own bedroom, for example, right? Or maybe they have their own way of like kind of sharing their emotions and their own like intrinsic motivation tools that work for them. And so integrating them in, but not starting from scratch is what I would want for you, Minh. So next question. This comes from Rebekah J and Jen Nipresh. I'm going to say it again. This comes from Rebekah and Jen. How do I know how much independence to give my teenager versus their skills and willingness levels? This is a great question, and it's not just for teenagers. So all along the way around the developmental planes of 0 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 9, 9 to 12, 12 to 15, 15 to 18, even 18 to 20. We were going to say 24 as sort of young adulthood. We notice that kids will often have the skills and capabilities to complete tasks independently, but then when it comes down to it, the motivation isn't there, or the willingness doesn't seem to be there. And then there's this tension that comes from that. If you're listening to this and you can relate, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, think of a time where you asked your child to do something and then they didn't do it, even though they're fully capable of doing it. This can sometimes be the core conflict in families, because there's this general sense of you should be able to do this. As a matter of fact, you can do this, but some part of you is choosing not to. And that is counter purpose with our family goals right now, whether it's to get out the door, keep the place hygienic and clean, treat each other with respect, whatever it is, right? And that can be infuriating. So let me just say how human of you if you have been supremely frustrated by this. What I want to invite you to consider, however, is that it's not just the skill of the task that's in play. It's also the skill of knowing yourself well enough to know how to get your motor running. It's how to self-regulate and tune in with your own needs to make sure that you're actually taking care of yourself, so you have the capacity to put energy and effort into this. It's also time management and ability to focus. And it can also be very relational, that they would do it if it wasn't you asking, because there's something that's unmended about your relationship. So we have to sometimes step back from just the question of, oh, is my child able to do this? If so, why aren't they doing it? Like they should be doing it, kind of the shoulds that we place onto it, the expectation that if they know how and they have the skills, then it should be happening. Then we need to get curious about the why. And so I like to start sort of like kind of go almost through the hierarchy of needs, starting with the basics. Are they under-resourced? Is there something that is taxing them and pulling them away, so their capacity to focus, to manage their time, or to even put the energy into this is diminished? get curious about what might be going on behind the scenes or at the root of things, and give them the benefit of the doubt that this isn't just laziness or unwillingness. And showing that concern and care in all of our relationships, whether they're 2 or they're 22, allows us to soften our position enough to receive information and have a more informed approach to making our demands or our asks. Because maybe they still need to do things like clean their room or help with getting things ready for a party or whatever the ask is, right? But you want to be able to wrap yourselves around like and accept and embrace that there's something else possibly going on here. And you can't be like demanding that they know what it is immediately, because they may not know, but you can absolutely raise the inquiry. And my favorite tool with adolescents who especially don't like to be put on the spot is you kind of pose a question or theory and then you walk out of the room. So it can look like this, especially with adolescents. Gosh, I know you know how to clean the bathroom. I know you've heard from myself and your father that it's important that we clean it, especially when we have people coming over, which, by the way, in an hour. And I know you have like some investment here too in like having a successful visit with your cousins. So I have to wonder what could possibly be going on that's getting in your way from getting started. And I could do the thing I usually do and like push and like remind you and nag you and get intense about it, but I'd rather not. So I'd like you to just like think about like, what is it that's stopping you from just getting started? And then I walk out of the room. Sometimes that's all that's required. They get organized. And then I ask them later, what was it? I'm so curious. And they're like, well, I was still feeling pretty sad about my friend, bailing on me the day before. And I guess I was distracted by that. Oh, honey, what do you need around that? Can I give you a hug? Come here, and sometimes they'll say, I don't know, but they'll just go do it anyway. That's fine. But what we're trying to do, friends, especially with adolescents, is we want to kind of give them a more dignified response so that they can rise to the occasion. We also, with all ages, we want to be thinking out loud what could be going on. Gosh, this is usually younger, right? This is usually no big deal. Like we just get dressed and then we're ready for breakfast, and we like breakfast. I mean, especially pancakes today. Maybe you just got to the point where you're just like too hungry. Let's try having a handful of grapes and then see if you feel like getting dressed, right? And like start to just try things with the little ones. No, I'm not hungry. Okay, well, maybe you need a little squeeze, Let's see if that helps. Would you like to come here for a hug? Squeeze down their arms, squeeze down their legs. For example, right? They need some connection. They need some grounding in their body. Maybe some what my occupational therapist coach in my program, Catherine Dunn, would say, some proprioceptive input, some deep pressure. Maybe they need a role, right? Like some sense of purpose, like being your helper. It's like, buddy, I know that it's not your favorite thing to pick out your clothes, but would you help me? I'm having a hard time finding those blue shorts. The ones that have the little sailboats on them. Yeah, let's see if we can find those. And you're like, I don't want to wear the blue shorts. Oh, okay. Can you show me which ones you do want to wear? Because I'm not having much luck here in this drawer. And you're like over in the drawer. So bringing them along, assuming the best, that there's just something going on there that needs to be addressed. And once you do, they'll come along with you. It shifts the whole communication dynamic. Can you hear it? Because it could sound a lot different from, why aren't you getting dressed? You know how to put your clothes on. Very different, right? Why aren't you helping? You know how important it is to get the house ready before guests come over. Like, I don't like being talked to that way. I know you don't either. We can still do that if we need to. And if that falls out of our face and it's just what we do, then it's okay. There are much worse ways it could go. But I would just challenge you, and I challenge myself, to pause and consider like what else could be going on and try to get to the bottom of things. That really does help them feel more connected and willing to bring their skills forward, right? And eventually you can even get into some identity pieces. Like I've had luck helping the kids say, kind of identify with being a helper, or identify with being a helpful person, or identifying with being, one time I've used this phrase like gracious host. What does a gracious host do? Identify with being kind, identify with being like insightful, right? And like saying, sometimes I get stuck, maybe you can be the unsticker, you know how to unstick things, right? You can make things up and make it silly and playful and fun, but it's something they can rise to. Okay. And really, there's some space for grace here, and we can assume the best. Now, after we assume the best, and it's been a pattern, and we've noticed a pattern, and we're kind of fed up with the pattern, we can address it as a pattern. And that's also important. We can say, the last 4 times we've had people over, this seems to be happening. It's a pattern that's not working. We're going to have to start really thinking about what this means. Like, can we even have people over? Like, is this working for us as a family? Let's have a bigger conversation about it, i.e. like a family meeting. Yeah. Especially with your teenagers, you can start to talk it through. I've had many clients just sit down and say, something's got to change, y'all. And I'm not the one who's necessarily going to come up with the solution. We're going to need to come up with it together. And we're going to have a conversation about this tomorrow night at dinner. So be ready. We're going to chat about this, and we're going to come up with a new plan. And you can take some reins and some leadership on that. But again, it's not saying, why aren't you doing it? You should be this, you should be that. You know how to, you know better, right? That's not a very productive start of a conversation, and it sure isn't a great pattern in a relationship. It actually adds more tension, and more power struggles tend to ensue. All right, that was a good one. So then there's this general question about mood management, and this comes from several people. So let's kick off the question. Myra, Teresa, Deanna, Alita, and Delia have all indicated that they would like some help improving mood management, not only for the kids, but also for themselves. So I have some hot tips here, but I also want you all to take a moment while you are listening to this to think of the last time you got really upset and your mood was way off and you were not feeling very effective as a parent as a result. Sometimes it's a painful place to visit, so make sure you're breathing. I particularly remember a time when I had a child in my care who wasn't listening very well and was actually disrupting other kids from their learning. And I remember distinctly feeling the sensation of wanting to grab the kid and then bring him over to the window, open the window, and toss him out of it. And so then I started needing to bring in some levity for myself. That was one of my go-tos, was make it funny, right? Lighten up. And so I started to say to myself, I could drop kick this child, to myself, out the window. I could drop kick this child out the window right now. And it was a way for me to acknowledge that tension was building in my body, that my mind was going to a place that wasn't productive. And it sounded funny to me, like ridiculous. And so then I even would say it to a coworker sometimes, right before I asked if we could tag out. So that's one thing you can do, is have some code way, if you have a co-parent or another caregiver in your world, that you can say, basically code red, I'm about to do something that I don't want to do. Can you please take over, and have a shorthand for that? The tag out is one of them. Another thing, though, coming back to lightening up, is remembering the age of this kid in front of you. Because when they sound sophisticated, and this is especially true for precocious children who have a lot of verbal skills and are quite smart, where like if you played a recording and like slow down their voice so it sounded older, you could be talking to a kid 3, 5, 10 years older than the kid you're talking to. So kids who are like verbally advanced, we get into the most trouble with here, because we get caught into the dialogue when really there's a young person in front of us. So we start fighting with them like they're not a 4-year-old. So another thing I would say to myself is, am I really picking a fight with a 4-year-old right now? Am I fighting with a 4-year-old, Vanessa? Come on. So there's a way you can check in with yourself. So there's all these ways we can kind of bring in some levity and some self-talk. We can also turn that externally towards the children and go, are you really thinking that it's that you can just pour all that soap out all over the floor? Like, what do you think is going to happen next, buddy? Like, really? And like, see, I'm taking on this like persona of like amusement and curiosity. And like, are you like just sort of this, you're blowing my mind right now, kid, and kids they'll feel caught at first, and I go, and then they'll look at you like, and they'll kind of like laugh at themselves too. And then you can segue to the more serious part of like, we really need to make sure we get all the soap off the floor, and then we can clean. And then you can have another conversation later that's a little more serious, like, okay, honey, before you go in the bathroom, what do we do with soap and what do we not do with soap? Right. And why? That's right. Yeah. I know it was kind of funny last time, but I don't want to spend that hour cleaning up again. That was a bummer, right? So bringing in that levity can really help. So that's just one of 6 strategies for cooling down in the moment. And I have 6 quick and easy strategies. It's a free guide. You can go check out the calmempoweredparent.com and or vanessacallahan.com. And there's a free guide there waiting for you with 6 strategies. And lightening up is one of them. 3 other ideas to lighten up: use a silly voice, crack a joke, use a pun, do things backwards, pretend you don't know how to do things. One of my favorite things is with little ones saying, doing it wrong even, and being like, I have a shoe to put on. Does the shoe go here? And I'll put it on my ear, and they'll be like, oh, it goes on your feet. That's right. Let's put shoes on feet. Or with a older child or teen even, we can do it wrong by stumbling on our words and saying something really incorrectly. We can pretend to forget and act kind of dumb and being like, where do the spoons go again? Like a voice. And they kind of like that, and there's just ways to bring in some silliness, like pretending to be animals or seeing who can make the most a convincing monkey sound. There's just all these ways we can bring in that lightening up playfulness that kids really respond to. Now, if this is already your strength, I want you to check out the other 5 strategies in the guide, because perhaps this is your go-to. And then when it doesn't work, you need a backup 2 or 3 ideas. Okay. And then I also just want to share and normalize that having challenges with mood management comes with the job. And the reason I'm going to say that I say this is, and this is something that we'll be covering very soon in the immersion over in my world, is that when kids are learning the tough lessons of life, and I'm going to say things like, you can't always have what you want when you want it, can't always have it your way. Other people have needs and wants that might come as a priority over yours, and you might need to wait and be patient. You might have to tolerate hearing no. You might have to tolerate like boredom, like things not being entertaining. There are going to be situations where you have less control than you'd like all these things. They're learning for the first time. Because I think of kids as like there's these little gods and goddesses that are getting put into human bodies in baby form, and they think they should be omnipotent, omnipresent, and the reality is they're in a social group. They have limitations of physics, of gravity, of how physical matter works, and they have to learn all these limitations all over again, or maybe for the first time, right? Depending on how you believe the soul works, etc. And so how do we help them acclimate to not only being human, but being in their specific time and place in human history, and including their social group and their family, right? Their family norms. So knowing that it's all new can be really helpful and help us keep that in perspective, but also just embracing that they're going to be upset. They're going to be sad. You're going to disappoint them. You're going to let them down. You're going to make them angry. You're going to make them scared sometimes inadvertently. And this is all normal. So mood management is not the absence of emotions. Mood management is knowing what to do when these emotions arise and understanding what roles they play in the learning process, in the coping process, in the making sense, making meaning of adversity process, etc. Okay. And if this is something you want to geek out on, I love this topic. Please shoot me an email, contact me, send another question with more details and example. I'd love to support you. All right. I have a question from Gianni, who's here live on the Zoom call. Gianni asks or shares, let me say that again. Gianni shares that his 6-year-old daughter likes to play director, which is what he's termed it in quotes, and tell Gianni where to go, what to do, what to say, etc. when they play pretend together. Inevitably, he'll do something wrong or can't understand what she wants him to do, or and she gets frustrated and then needs to leave and get a tissue. It also isn't much fun for me to play with her like this, so I can also end up getting irritated. How can we avoid this negative end result? I love this question because it's so specific. Like, how many of you who are listening can paint a picture of this exact scenario? I can. It's very relatable. So first of all, good for you for even entertaining this type of play. And kids who are trying to figure out how power and influence works will create games where they are the boss or the teacher or the lead, something, the big dog, the captain, right? And you've nicknamed director. And that's great. I'm glad that you have that opportunity to play in those spaces. And it's actually a learning opportunity for you to sometimes do it wrong, sometimes have a different idea, because what we want our little 6-year-olds to learn, and all kids, even teens and tweens, is that yes, being in charge means having a lot more influence and control, but it doesn't mean supreme control. And we are, if whatever we're working on is with another living being, animal, plant, or person, human, they're going to have needs and wants and like a willpower of their own and ideas of their own. And so what you're actually giving her an opportunity to do, Gianni, is practice what it's like to incorporate the input of someone else, or how to be gracious when somebody makes a mistake. So I wonder about pausing in those moments and acknowledging that it's her emotion, and like how she might be experiencing that. Oh, sweetie, this seems to be frustrating you. I get it, because you really want me to do this, but I have a different idea. Or you really want me to do this a certain way, and I'm not quite getting it. And here's where I want you to invite her into a different identity. Do you think you could be a really helpful director and show me how you want me to do it so I can learn from you? Or do you think you could give me a little time to try my idea so we can see what happens, and then we can always go back to your idea? Right. So you're trying to like insert these opportunities for her to modulate, right? To modulate her expectations, to allow the locus of control to be like shifted or shared about how things are going to play out. And if she's unwilling, you can have a very fair response and say, well, I'm getting a little tired of only doing it the way you're asking, so I'm going to need a break from this game. And she could say, no, let's keep playing. And you say, well, the only way that I want to continue playing is if we have an opportunity to try out my idea, or if you'll show me how to do this well so I can do my best. You can absolutely ask for that grace. And if she's not willing to give it to you, it's okay to end the play. And so it's not actually, and I don't know if you'll like this, Jenny, but it's not actually to prevent the tissue and the tension. It's so that at least when you get into these spaces, it's growth oriented and there's an opportunity for that growth to flourish. And then she also can get the lesson and the message that if she doesn't allow others to have input and to take breaks or to have what they need to succeed, then the other person might tire of the dynamic. And that's just natural. And it's okay for us to do that. It's actually important that we give kids that sort of like structured response so they can learn better how things work. Yeah. And then you can also negotiate before the next time. You can preview and say, well, last time we had this opportunity to play this game, it went this way. I'm wondering if we can try something different today where we take turns being in charge, or take turns being whatever the role is, alpha cat or something. And maybe we can even set a timer on that so it's fair. Like, you have your 20 minutes and then I have, and you can even say, you can make a compromise and say like, I just want 5 minutes to try it, and then you can even uplift her and say, you do it so well and I've learned so much from you. I want a chance to try doing it the way you do it, and also some of my ideas. So it doesn't always have to be oppositional, right? We don't have to immediately give her something to push back on. It can even be like complimentary and do it from a genuine place, of course. Gianni, how did we do? Let us know in the chat about how that addressed your question. We'd love to see your response. Okay. And while he's doing that, I'm going to go back to one of our questions from the group. Isn't this fun though, to hear such a variety of questions? I feel like it gives us this opportunity to get into some of the nuances of how this all works, right? Okay, let me see. We're actually done with our listed questions for today. I'm pretty sure. I'm going to double check. Well, I just hold on with me for a second. This has been such a good one. There's been such a span of topics. I really appreciate that. Let's look and see. Interesting. Okay. Because I know the reminders went out. I'm looking for them right now. Okay. I'm not seeing it where I usually see it. Oh, here it is. Okay. Let me just make sure we got through them all. Okay. Sorry about the delay. Here we go. I just want to make sure I found it, the right one. Yep. Okay. That was all of them. So let's hear Gianni's response. Gianni says, fabulous tips. Really appreciate the sample language and note about previewing for the next time. So glad we were able to support you today, Gianni, with that piece. Yeah. And, what I hope you hear in this is an invitation for there to be some space just to figure it out over time. Because this is maybe something that you're going to be playing through for the next 6 months to 2 years, games where she likes to be in charge, and the way she's in charge can change from, again, like playing teacher or playing, wolf pack, and she's the alpha wolf or whatever it might be. And what a gift you're giving her with the opportunity of having someone who unconditionally loves her, who she feels secure and safe with, giving her the opportunity to sort through when you're no longer interested in playing the role of doing everything she says, and that there's something more collaborative that you're asking for, or you'd like a break, or you'd like an opportunity to be shown how to do something better when she's not liking the way you're doing something. Also, sometimes kids need help realizing that they've come to their limit of playtime, and what they really need is something else. Like maybe they need a snack, or they need to change a scene, or they need, get out of the hot sun, or away from the noisy thing that has been kind of taxing their nervous system, and they don't realize that they're actually getting tired and frustrated. This is especially true for our more sensitive kids, and kids who are still, and most kids still are figuring out what they need in the moment. So you can also do a little check-in and say, hey, I'm noticing that things are getting a little tense. I'm feeling it too. I wonder what we might need. And just even that question, I wonder what we might need. And you can go through the HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, sort of shortcut, or another thing that tends to be what's up for your kid, and something maybe that they could help you identify. Like just check our foreheads. Are we sweaty? With the heat wave this summer, it's on my mind. Are we sweaty? Is that, could we be too hot? Do we need to find some shade or have a cool beverage and cool down? Because sometimes the tension is only coming up because resources are depleted and the situation is just like not sustainable anymore. And it was great for the first 20 minutes, but we're just in a different stage. This helps, kind of phase of play. And this helps our kids to even pause and ask that with their friends. Like I loved when my 8 and 9-year-olds, after being with me for a few years in the classroom, would turn to each other and say, it seems like we're getting into fights for no reason. Maybe we're just too hot. On the side, because that level of like self-awareness, checking in with each other and care and community and problem solving. And like, maybe it's not your fault, person in front of me, that you're the problem, or maybe it's not just me. Maybe there's something situationally that needs to be addressed. Such a great life skill I was always so proud of. So we can look for those moments too. And I always say, reinforce the good behavior when it shows up, or the insightful, sort of awareness moments. So if she even says something like, it's been a while since I've had lunch, like, I'm so proud of you for listening to your body. Maybe it is that your tummy's hungry and your energy's kind of low. Why don't we try having a snack and see what happens, right? Good idea. I like how you're thinking. I like how you're, listening to your body, right? Those kinds of things. All right, so that's my last little piece there. So good to have been joined by Lillian and Gianni, and those of you who are listening live on YouTube and or on the Facebook group and or the recording of the Ask Me Anything podcast. So glad that you're able to, move through some new ideas today and consider how it might relate to your family and your kids. So good on you. Way to show up today for yourself and your families. Lots of love until next time. Bye for now.